through Chicago to the south was where my Native American ancestors lived. And those historic roots can still be seen today. City names like Wauwatosa, Muskego, and Waukesha are all derived from the Potawatomi language. But the story is not unique to Potawatomi. There are 10 other Native American tribes throughout Wisconsin, and they all have their own unique histories and deep ties to people and communities in Wisconsin. I hope all of you enjoy your virtual time in Milwaukee. Hopefully you can all visit soon to experience Milwaukee and Wisconsin firsthand. Thank you, Miigwech and Bamamina.
Thank you so much. Now, in recognition of Black Lives Matter, we wanted to take a moment to recognize what's going on in our country right now. I would like to invite Joshua Harris Till, the president of the Young Democrats of America, to say a few words.
In the summer of 1955, a young man traveled from Chicago to a small town in Mississippi for some much needed time with his family. On August 24th, while skipping church, he went to a local store to buy some candy. It was there he was supposedly accused of either whistling or flirting with a woman named Carolyn Bryant. Some of you may have heard this story, but for those of you who hasn't, what comes next is two adult males kidnapping this 14-year-old child from his home in the middle of the night to torture him, beat him, shoot him, and then throw him into a river. That child's name was Emmett Till, and unfortunately, he was a cousin that I never had the opportunity to meet. He would be 79 years old today. I bring him up because he was compared a lot to Tamir Rice, who was simply playing in the park when officers drove up and took his life away within seconds of leaving his vehicle. George Floyd pleaded with officers for 8 minutes while a knee was on the back of his neck. Rayshard Brooks simply slept for a few hours before his life was taken by police officers. Elijah McClain struggled for days while poison he was injected with slowly killed him. Breonna Taylor has been dead for 5 months and not a single arrest has been made. The criminal justice system is broken. White supremacy runs rampant within some of our police academies and stations. Black Lives Matter has created the largest civil rights movement in history, and we need you to advocate from the front lines to the voting booths. We can't let their deaths be in vain. We can't afford to stop, and we must say their names. Please join me in a moment of silence right now. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. I call this meeting of the DNC Youth Council back in order. My name is Michael Kapp. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a DNC member from California, and I'm proud to serve as the chair of the DNC Youth Council. Delegates, Youth Council members, members of the public, welcome to the second and final session of the Youth Council at the 2020 Democratic National Convention on the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Yesterday, we heard from young Black leaders in government and grassroots organizers who are on the front lines of climate activism. In a few minutes, we'll hear a panel on the future of DACA and immigration from dreamers and an elected leader who has personal experience growing up undocumented. And later in our program today, we'll hear from the youth leadership of our Democratic Party and learn how young people can and must get involved if we want a Democratic Party that respects the input of younger Americans and reflects our values. But before we get to that, I want to introduce our panel. We go to the panel. For the last 4 years, Donald Trump and the white supremacists in this administration have been callous, cruel, and dehumanizing to immigrants. The list of evils is extraordinary and deeply racist. Family separation, deporting veterans, militarized raids on workplaces, denial of COVID-19 testing and treatment, bans based on faith and country and origin, and turning away refugees and asylum seekers fleeing violence and persecution. Our immigration system was broken long before Donald Trump came down that escalator and gave a modern voice to white supremacy. His defeat at the ballot box won't fix it. That falls on us. I'd like to welcome our set of panelists and our moderator, Kevin Lima, the DNC's Youth Political Director. Up next, the panel on DACA and the future of immigration.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are welcoming 3 special guests to this panel. First, Jessica Itzayana Vasquez Mesta, who was born in Mexico and immigrated to the United States with her family in 1999. As an undocumented immigrant in Oklahoma, she found a home and passion in Dream Action Oklahoma, a community-based organization that aims to empower local immigrant communities. We also have Ellie Perez, the current political director at the Arizona Education Association. She is formerly the finance director for Representative Greg Stanton, for Mayor Kate Gallego, and the political and field director for Stanton. And in 2012, Ellie received DACA and has dedicated her career to helping her community. Finally, we have Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo, who was elected as a representative of the 51st Assembly District in December of 2017. She is a member of the Health, Appropriations, Utilities and Energy, Labor, Privacy and Consumer Protections and Rules Committee. Carrillo represents the people of East LA, Northeast LA, and neighborhoods of Zeno, Echo Park, Chinatown, and Silver Lake. And so my first question is actually to Assemblywoman Carrillo. Your story resonates with mine very closely. My sister and my family, they were, my parents were formerly undocumented immigrants who moved from this country, from Guatemala. And, as you yourself, a formerly undocumented immigrant who came to the U.S. as a child, how have those experiences shaped the way you tackle public office?
Great question. And thank you everybody for joining and for the invitation to be on this panel. I hear a little bit of feedback, but I hope everything's okay. Well, I think lived experiences matter. I happen to be one of 2 members in the Assembly that is formally undocumented, one of 3 in the legislature in California that is formally undocumented. And when we bring our stories to the table, it changes the conversation because you are no longer just something that people talk about or that legislators talk about. You are literally at the table making those decisions and being able to advocate for your lived experiences, for the experiences of people in your community and across this nation. I often tell the story, I came to this country when I was 5. My family fled the civil war in El Salvador. And I came with my grandmother. My mother was already in the United States. And the current policies of family separations at our border means that if it were me today, if I were the 5-year-old child immigrating today, I would have been separated from my mother and from my grandmother and put in a cage. And who knows what would have happened to our family. And so those stories that we hear now are no different than my own lived experience and the experiences of you and your family, Kevin, or Ellie, or Jessica, or whoever is watching this right now and that resonates with. So having had that experience, overcoming challenges, choosing and deciding to run for office, and all the hurdles that it took for me to get here, to now be in the California legislature and to advocate for the issues of our community is completely a privilege, but also an immense responsibility that I cannot do alone. And it takes all of us to be able to change policy, not only for the state, but for across the nation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. Jessica, what calls you to do this work?
Thanks, Kevin. Well, I migrated to Oklahoma in 1999 with my family, and I grew up undocumented in Oklahoma. And growing up undocumented in a very red state is hard, to say the least. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of shame. But I found strength and I found community when I met a group of unashamed and unapologetic immigrant youth. And when I met them and when I entered these spaces, that's when I learned that the youth that's where the future is. That's where the power is. And so I was just obsessed with DACA and with the youth and with the work that they do. So what calls me to do this work is the youth that have helped me, but also the fact that when we talk about DACA and we talk about other things, there are so many family and friends who were left out. I have friends and family who are not at the table even now. So we have to continue fighting for those who are left out. And we have to recognize that even though DACA is still hanging on by a thread, there are so many more families that are not getting the help they need.
Right. And as this administration has shown us that they are willing to let that continue to happen. And Ellie Perez, you've been organizing with the immigration rights movement for a while. What has that experience been like for you as you've worked with BIPOC and disproportionately impacted in Arizona?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Assemblywoman Carrillo, for being here. And thank you, Jessica, for sharing your stories. In the background, I'm like, yes, like everything that you're saying is something that as a woman of color and as an undocumented woman, I think we feel, and no one understands that better than someone who's lived in our shoes. But Kevin, for me, the story was a little different, right? The immigration groups here were organizing and they were marching and they were taking to the streets. Although to me that is a very important aspect of moving the needle and moving the movement forward, I felt that I needed to do more. And I still marched and I still took to the streets. And then I went and I knocked on doors. I helped register people to vote. And then we realized that the marching and the door knocking wasn't going to be enough until we got people elected into office that were going to pass policies to protect people like me, and more importantly, people like my mother, who brought me here when I was 4 years old, right? With the idea that I was going to have the opportunity to have a better life. And the way that I, pay tribute to that and pay tribute to her sacrifice and thank her for her sacrifice is helping elect people who are going to protect people who look like me and people who live like me. And so in Arizona, just like in Oklahoma, living in a red state is hard when you're undocumented. But growing up, it didn't mean, being undocumented didn't mean much until the raids, until the Arpaio raids, until ICE, and until 1070. And in 2010, when Arizona passed SB 1070, I can pinpoint the exact moment that my life changed, and I realized nobody is going to protect my mom. Nobody's going to protect my family, and nobody's going to protect me if I don't do it myself. And so, just like Jessica, I found a group of brave and loud and passionate undocumented students who were doing that, who were knocking on doors, who showed me the power that I had, even though I was undocumented. They said, if you could get 50 people to vote for you, that will decide an election. And it has. And in Arizona, you've seen the power of undocumented communities. It's reflective of our legislature, of our city councils, and it's reflective of who we put in Congress right now.
Right. I completely agree. And this is, a movement that was led by young people. And to be surrounded by three powerful Latina women on this panel, we need more of Latina women in Congress. And so this is a question to you, Assemblywoman Carrillo. With DACA providing peace of mind to hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S., how do we build DACA confidence in the American justice system and protect them from further threat of deportation when they're under constant attacks from this current administration?
I'm sorry, Kevin, you broke up there for a minute. I didn't quite hear the question.
Oh, yes. So we're providing peace of mind to hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. Like, how do we rebuild that? How do we rebuild DACA recipient confidence in the American justice system and protect them from further threat of deportation when you have, this constant threat from this current administration?
So I would say that the first thing that we need to do in an effort to protect DACA is to protect the census. So right now, for example, my community, Congressional District 34, with Congressman Jimmy Gomez, who is a friend, is one of the lowest counted census districts in the state of California. And I would imagine that in immigrant Latino communities or API communities or communities that are low income and have mixed status families, the census numbers, I would wager, are very low. The census is important because it's about representation. The number of people that are in your community have an impact to your actual members of Congress, your Senate, your Assembly, your local representation, and the amount of resources that go into our community. So when we are not counted, when undocumented families or DACA recipients feel scared about the citizenship question, you should know one thing. The citizenship question is not public, and it is not even a question that's on the census. However, we do need everyone to be counted so that our communities are able to elect representatives like myself or Congressman Gomez or the people in your communities that can best represent you and continue to fight for DACA. And for other issues that are important, and for overall comprehensive immigration reform in a total package. So I would say, the best thing that we can do right now before the end of September, because we know that this administration has also shortened the time for us to actually get counted, is to please talk to your neighbors, your family, know that the citizenship question is not on the census, fill it out, go to the website, my2020census.gov, call it in, mail it in, and make sure you get counted so that our communities get the monetary resources that we need to continue to thrive, survive, and move forward.
100%. And it's, it sometimes even falls on us as the, younger generation to help our parents and help our Dios and Diaz, so that, so 100% to that answer. And moving to Jessica, how dangerous has this Trump administration been for DACA, and what DACA policy has been rolling back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't even put into words how dangerous this administration has been, not just to DACA, just to our immigrant community. Talking specifically about DACA, the administration has dismantled it. DACA, as we know it, is no longer a thing. Right now, I mean, they're still doing the 1-year renewals, but just the fact that it has been dismantled as much as it has goes to show you where this administration's priorities are. But really, when speaking about some of the priorities, some of the things that the administration has rolled back, I think one of the biggest problems that I see is how they have dismantled the current legal immigration system, and how they've limited the legal avenues to migration. Like, this is extremely problematic to me. And not only that, the way that they've expanded who they criminalize and how they criminalize this process. Assemblywoman Carrillo mentioned the cages at the border, and that's just one example of how they continue to criminalize our brown and our poor immigrants. And just the way that they've increased the pipeline from detention to deportation. All of these things on top of the dismantling of DACA is what keeps me up at night, and that's the reason why I'm here. And that's the reason why we know that this administration is dangerous for our community.
Yes, I 100% agree. Question to Ali. What do you think about young people who are considering not voting this year when we know that this is what this current administration is doing and there's a chance that they're going to be able to do this for another 4 more years?
Oh, I have some very real thoughts about, millennials and young people who are considering sitting this election out. I actually, Facebook gives you memories. 4 years ago, I sat on a panel about youth and how youth were going to change the election. And I said this again and again and again. People my age need to vote, right? We are the generation that has to make the difference, and we are the future. And then we didn't come out and vote. And now millions of people took to the streets to march for Black lives, to march for communities who have been oppressed, and to march for equality and justice for all, no matter what our background was. But as harsh as this is going to sound, those marches mean nothing if you don't go out and vote. Because if you don't go out and vote, then we will continue to have to march. We will continue to have to protest. And I am not saying that the vote and that electing one person is going to make the big difference and change everything and it's a rose-colored world. Absolutely not. But that means that it's a foot in the door. It's a step in the right direction. And we will continue to protest and we will continue to march, but at least the bridge will start to be built where we can have these policies that are going to help. Jessica's right. DACA, when people say, oh, you must be so happy that DACA survived. No, DACA is not real anymore. My sister cannot apply for DACA, right? I have a mixed status family where 2 of us have DACA and 1 of us does not. And our family has military servants. They are out overseas right now. We're still people undocumented and citizens in my family. And it's going to continue to keep going if we don't vote. I think that for young people, you have to ask yourself the question of, the day after the election, are you going to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I did absolutely everything I could to make sure that my community was safe? And that means voting. It is your responsibility and it is your moral duty as a citizen of what I truly believe the greatest nation in the world to vote.
And I guess just one more question to Assemblywoman Carrillo. What do you think? What do you think about young people who are not considering not voting this year?
I would say that every time that you don't exercise your opportunity to vote and let your voice heard, you are allowing someone else to make that decision for you. And I don't know about you, but I don't like anyone making decisions for me. Why would you let anybody else make a decision for you? put it in context, everybody loves Hamilton. Hamilton was somewhere between the ages of 19 and 24 when all those things in the musical were taking place. Thomas Jefferson was only 33 years old when he literally pretty much wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He was in the room where it happened. This country is formed by young people. It is formed by the spirit of innovation. It is